kids, it's been a little while, and it's Chef Beth from Kids Cooking for Life. I'm back today to do a little kitchen chemistry with you. I've been thinking about what it might be fun to try, and looking in my refrigerator, I found some cream and milk and buttermilk and thought, what would be fun to make with those things? And I suddenly realized that I haven't taught you how to make cheese yet. And there's some really easy ways to do it. And so I thought today we're going to make queso fresco, which is also known as paneer or fromage blanc in other places. It's basically a fresh cheese that you can make with milk in your refrigerator, and you can use lemon juice or vinegar and even buttermilk to acidify the milk. And you heat it up, and when it comes to the right temperature, you stir in your acid and you add it to your milk, and you stir it very gently, and then you let the chemistry happen, which is that the proteins in the milk, called caseins, turn into curdles and separate from the whey. And after about 10 minutes, you pour it through some cheesecloth and you let the whey drain out. And then you have the solids in your cheesecloth, which you can either eat pretty much right away, or you can let them settle and let more of the whey drain out, and then you can turn it into like a harder cheese. You can also add some lovely ingredients like fresh herbs or chives to it. You can be served in many ways. You can sprinkle it on top of tacos. You can do all kinds of things with it. So let's get started today on making our fresh cheese, queso blanco. So to get started today, we have to compile a little bit of equipment. So I've looked around my kitchen to find the things that we're going to need to make our cheese. And our recipe today calls for a quart of whole milk. And I have a half a gallon here, which probably has about half left in it. I can feel that it's half, but I am going to measure it. And as you remember from our previous courses or classes on measuring, we can use our conversion chart, which I keep handy in case I'm not sure how much I need. I can convert what I have into cups so that I know that I have the exact amount that I need. So a quart of whole milk is 2 pints, and as you recall, a pint is 2 cups. So to get 2 pints, we're going to need 2 cups plus another 2 cups, which is 4 cups altogether of whole milk. And then I need a cup of buttermilk, and I have buttermilk here, and it's about a third full. So again, if a quart is 4 cups, we just need a quarter of this container. And I have a little extra milk on hand just in case I don't have quite enough of my milk. So we need 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice. I have a half a lemon here, which will be more than enough. So I'm going to get out my measuring spoons and measure out 3/4 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to use a half a teaspoon and a 1/4 teaspoon, and that will be 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. You can also eyeball it. The salt part is something that you do to taste. So you might add a little extra anyway. So if you wanted to take your teaspoon when it comes to adding the salt and level it off so that it's nice and flat, that might be a good start too. You could just add 3/4 of it. So let's get started with our measuring. Now, when you make cheese, you want to do a couple of things. You want to make sure that all of your implements are sterilized and clean. It's very important to make sure that they're very clean. So make sure that when you get your pots out, inspect them and make sure that they're absolutely spotless. And if they're not, then give them a good wash in hot soapy water. The same goes for your spoons and anything that you'll be using. I'm going to be using also a colander and a sieve today, and we're going to be using cheesecloth, which I've washed, and I'll be actually reusing from some other cheese project, but this has been thoroughly washed and is clean, and I'm going to dampen it. in water and wring it out. Now, it goes without saying that you will have washed your hands very thoroughly, just as we always do before we start cooking. So if you haven't already done so, I'd like you to pause this tape and go and wash your hands like we've taught you how to do, which is to sing ABC or Mary Little Lamb twice, and then come back and we'll start making our cheese. Okay, so now that you've washed your hands and you're ready to get cooking, let's do our measurements. So our instructions say to take a quart of whole milk and very slowly heat it up, stirring in a heavy bottomed pan. So you can see here I have a very heavy bottom pan. And we're only making a quart, so I don't need a lot of a pan. This is plenty for me. And we're going to bring this up to 175 degrees. And in order to measure the temperature, I'm going to use a thermometer. I have two kinds here. You probably have one of these at home, and if you don't, they're not expensive. This is a digital thermometer. So I push a button and then I just stick it in the milk and it will tell me the temperature. If you don't have a digital thermometer, you can also use a regular thermometer. And it works the same way. You just stick it in and it will register the temperature on the dial. Either one is fine. So we're going to heat up our quart of milk, and then when it's at 175 degrees, we're going to add our buttermilk, which is acidic, and our lemon juice, which is acidic. And so the acid is going to cause the milk to curdle, and the heat and the curdling will separate it from the whey. And I will show you in a close-up what that looks like when we get to that point. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, the other thing I wanted to mention is because I am actually going to use some of my fresh cheese as a kind of like an hors d'oeuvre or an appetizer, I'm going to add some lemon zest to it. So I've got half of the lemon here, and I'm just going to take my zester and, being careful not to get any of the white pith underneath, I'm just going to take the zest off which is the yellow part of the skin, off of this lemon. It smells so fresh. Oh my goodness. It's one of the best smells in the world. And I'm leaving the white behind, and I'm just taking the yellow part. I'm almost at about a tablespoon right now. That's going to be plenty. It's just to add a little fresh lemon flavor, and I'll show you what I mean when we get to that point. Okay, so I've zested my lemon, and I'm going to tap that off, and I'm going to set it aside until I'm ready to use it. So now I'm going to take my lemon juicer, which is a hand juicer, and my half a lemon. I notice that there are a few seeds here, and so one of the reasons why I'm not just going to put this straight into the milk is I want to make sure that I remove the seeds. So I'm going to take the end of the tip of my knife, and I'm just going to, where I can see the seeds, put the tip of my knife into the middle of the lemon and just pull those little seeds out just like that so that I can get rid of the seeds. There might be some more after I actually juice the lemon, so we'll find out. So here I go. I'm going to stick the point in to the middle of my lemon and turn it and squeeze. Oh, there's a seed or two. I really like these manual squeezers. And you get a lot of the juice. And if you don't have to squeeze a lot of citrus, this is a fun way to do it. Okay, so I'm looking into my lemon juice here, and I see that I do have just a few seeds here. So I'm going to very gently pull them out and discard them. One more. There. So this is quite a bit more. It only calls for 1.5 teaspoons, and I have about 2 tablespoons here. So I'm not going to need all of my lemon juice, I don't think. But it's okay to have a little extra because we can always use it for something else. And you know me, I like to clean up my workspace as I go. So I'm just going to give it a little wipe down and clean it up. And now we're ready for the next part. So we're going to measure out a quart of milk. A quart of milk is 4 cups. And this is a 2-cup measure, so we're going to need 2 of these in our pan. So let's start with, that's 2 cups. And then we have a little bit more in here. I don't know if any of you know about this. This is called A2 milk. And A2 milk is milk that comes from cows that produce what's called a protein called A2. And it's easier to digest than regular milk. So if you ever have a milk sensitivity, you might want to try A2 milk. It's actually a little easier to digest, and if you have some milk intolerance or dairy intolerance, this is something to look for. I like to make my cheese out of it because, again, for people who have a little bit of lactose intolerance, it's very digestible. So I'm just going to top this up with some more of the milk that I have here to make my quart. So now I've got the second of my 2 cups, a quart of milk. You can always make more, but I suggest for the first time that you do this, that you actually make just a smaller quantity to make sure, first of all, that you like it, and secondly, it's a little easier to manage this quantity. If you're going to make more, you're probably going to need a parent to really stand by and help you because the pot will get quite heavy. Okay. So we've got our quart of milk, and now I'm going to start my heat. Now, it's very important when you're heating milk not to scald it or boil it, because then you will ruin the milk and your cheese won't taste good. So what I've done is I have a gas stove. I have this, what we call sort of like a warming plate, and this provides better heat distribution than just having a flame underneath of my pot. So I actually use that to distribute the heat a little bit better. If you don't have something like that, it's okay. You don't have to use it, but it does definitely keep the temperature more consistent. Have to be careful that I don't overheat my milk. When you're doing these recipes, often they will suggest that you heat the milk to as high as 190 or 195 degrees. It's not necessary because you're already using pasteurized milk. You don't want to use ultra pasteurized milk because it won't curdle properly. So just remember that when you use the milk, you want to just get regular pasteurized milk, and I'm using organic milk today, and that A2 that I just was talking about. Okay, so we're going to let that heat up, and then we're going to measure out a cup of buttermilk. There it is, a cup, and I have a little bit left over. I'm tempted to put it in, but I'm going to follow the recipe precisely so that we see how it turns out. Okay, so I have a little bit of buttermilk left over that I can use for making pancakes or waffles or something else. So there's my cup of buttermilk. Now I'm going to get another small container, and I'm going to measure out the lemon juice that I need. So remember, we need 1.5 teaspoons. So here's my teaspoon measure. I'm going to sink it down into the lemon juice and pour that in. And here's a 1/2 teaspoon measure right here. Now, if you were to put a little bit more lemon juice in, it would be fine. And if you don't have lemon juice and you only have vinegar in the house, you can also use vinegar. You can use apple cider vinegar or white distilled vinegar. It just changes the flavor slightly, but you can use any of those things. And buttermilk, as we now know, is acidic, and will also help with the curdling of our milk. So as we wait for our milk to heat up, you could be thinking about what you'd like to put into your queso fresco to mix in with it. I like chives, as I mentioned. You can also chop up fresh herbs. You can put a little bit of garlic or shallots, whatever you have on hand, or you can just leave it plain. And so at the end, we will add some salt to it and taste it and see how we like it. And then if you want to, you can also put it into a mold or press it into a ball or flatten it and put a weight on top of it and put it in the fridge, let's say overnight, and it will let more of the whey drain out and it will have a texture that's a little bit firmer. And then you can cook with it. You can make Indian dishes like saag paneer. There's all sorts of ways you can use it. So it's very versatile. You can also use it like ricotta cheese. If you don't set it to be firm, you can use it like ricotta cheese in a recipe for, let's say, lasagna. So there's lots and lots of things you can do with this cheese once you've made it. And it's really simple. And as you can see, not very expensive either, because you're doing it at home and you don't have to leave the house to go to the grocery store. So we'll come back as soon as the milk is up to temperature and we'll add our acids and I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see, we have our pot on the stove and I have my digital thermometer, which I have pushed the button for. So the ambient temperature here is about 74, 75 degrees. And I'm going to stick it in the pot and see what it says. So right now we're up to 137 degrees, 138. So we're getting up to temperature pretty quickly. I think I'm going to turn down my heat a little bit because as you can see, it's on about a medium high. So we're going to turn it down a little bit just so that we don't go past the point that we want to go past. And here is my squeaky clean spoon. I'm just going to stir the milk a little bit. Again, we don't want it to stick to our pot, and I'm going to stick the thermometer in again, and we'll see what our temperature is. Just going to back away for a moment and check out my recipe. They said go to 175. So that's what we'll do. We'll go to 175. And when I get to 175, I'm going to turn it right down when I add my acids. We can just turn it right off. And pretty quickly, you will see the chemical reaction. Oh, it's starting to simmer a little bit. I'm going to stir this. I can hear it. I can also feel on the bottom of my pan, I can feel that it's cooking a little bit. So again, I'm going to turn the heat down. And you can see there's a little bit of foam here, just around the edges. Can you see that? So we're getting very close to our temperature. Let's look again. 165, 7, there we're 170. So 5 more degrees. It's pretty warm standing here. I'm going to move my thermometer over to the side a little bit. Technically speaking, once you pass 165, you should be in pretty good shape, but I think they just have us, there's 175, I just saw it. So we're just going to get up to 175. There we go. So I'm going to turn off my pot and I'm going to give a quick stir just so that I get the milk going in the right direction. Sorry about my finger being in the way there. Okay, now I'm going to add my buttermilk. And I'm going to add my lemon juice. And I'm going to give a very gentle stir just to get things started. Okay, now we're gonna just watch what happens. I can already see that there is a chemical change happening. Can you see? Look at that. You see those curds are starting to form? That's your chemistry. Those are the curds. And what we're going to do now is we're going to let it curdle for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to put on my timer, and after 10 minutes we'll come back and see what's happened. We'll check in maybe in about 5 minutes so you can see if it's progressed. Okay. So we are at about the 5-minute mark here, and I wanted to just give you the chance to see what's happening here. These curds are starting to separate from the whey. We do want to just keep them undisturbed for the whole 10 minutes. I actually did turn the heat on very low because it's still kind of milky white, and what we want to see is that when the whey separates from the curds, the whey turns yellow, and sometimes we just need to have a little bit more heat. So I am just turning on the heat. You can see a little bit of the yellow. There we go, in there. But I don't want to disturb them too much. We really should leave them alone. Okay, so let's be patient for another 5 minutes, and we'll come back and pour off our curds. So now is the exciting period of time when you can see that after another 5 or 6 minutes or so, the curds have separated from the whey, and how you can tell is when you move the curds, you see this clear liquid? That's your whey. So this is looking much better. So what I did is I actually turned the heat on very, very low, and it helped to get them to separate. So if you're finding that you don't get to this stage with the clear kind of yellowish whey and your curds, then it would probably be a good idea just to turn the heat on very low and finish letting them cook. So these are ready to be ladled into my cheesecloth, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take you over to my sink, and you can see here I've prepared a double thickness of cheesecloth, okay? And underneath of it is a sieve or a basket that I am going to kind of nestle everything in, and then everything is inside of a bigger colander, inside of a bowl. And the reason why it's inside of a bowl is I do not want to throw away the whey. You can cook with the whey. You can use it for making pancakes and bread and anything at all, and it's a fantastic meat tenderizer, so you can use it to marinate chicken or meat. So don't throw away your whey. You're going to keep it, and you're going to use it to cook with. So I've moved my curds and whey over to next to the sink, and now I also have my ladle, and I'm going to take my ladle and gently I'm going to ladle my curds into the waiting cheesecloth, just like this, very gently, like so. You can see the separation, right? They don't look very nice right now, do they? They look kind of weird, but just you wait. Now I've gotten down to the point where I can probably just pick up the pan and pour the rest in. Because I can't really film and pour at the same time. And so let's just pour the rest in like this. Okay. All right. So now we've got our beautiful curds in their cheesecloth. And I'm going to pick up the cheesecloth, and we are going to show you the whey. You can hear it dripping out underneath. See? And it's sort of yellow and clear. And as I said, it's full of nutrition, so don't throw it away. All right, we'll be right back. So now I'm going to do my best to show you what this looks like. I've changed the bowl to a smaller bowl. So it's still draining, but it's draining into a smaller bowl. And as you can see, my mixture here is still kind of loose, but if I move the cheesecloth, it sort of forms into a little bit of a ball, like that. Can you see that? It's sort of coming down the sides, and pretty soon I'll be able to lift it up and tie a little knot and kind of squeeze it into a little ball, which is what I'm going to do right now. So right now, you can see the whey dripping out. It's still very hot, so you want to be careful because you don't want to burn yourself. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this cheesecloth a little bit so that I can kind of press a little bit more of this whey out. So I've got that tied, and I'm going to tie this. Okay, there we go. And you can actually, when it cools off a little bit more, you can squeeze it a little bit, but it's kind of best to just let it use its own weight, okay, to drain. All right, so we're going to let that drain for at least 30 minutes. And then we'll come back, and what we're going to do is we're going to salt it. Okay, because it doesn't have any salt in it right now, and it's kind of bland. So we're going to salt it right now, and then we're going to decide what we want to use it for. And like I said, I like to add some chives to mine, so I might chop up some chives and add the lemon zest and maybe a few grinds of black pepper or even some chili flakes, something like that to it, and some fresh herbs. If you want though, you can just leave it plain, and then if you want to leave it in the fridge overnight to continue draining, it'll get a little bit firmer, and then you can just, crumble it up on tacos or a salad. So in half an hour, we'll come back and we'll see how much firmer it has become. So now it's time to chop up a few of my herbs, and so I'm just going to show you what I'm doing here. I take my chives and I line them up, and remember to use the claw so that you don't hurt your fingers. Just take a very sharp knife and very carefully mince your chives. And you're just going to hold them together with your fingers, tucking them under, letting your knuckle be against the blade, and just gently mince the chives. You're probably going to have more than you need, but they're so delicious. You can use them in salads and soups and all kinds of things. And these are fresh out of my garden, so I know they're going to be delicious. And I think for color, I'm going to take the little bud. I don't know if you can see this very well. There we go. The little buds that are at the top of the chives. These are actually their seeds. But what I'm going to do is I am actually going to sprinkle some of them into my cheese because it'll look pretty. And a lot of flowers are edible. I don't know if you knew this, but you can eat nasturtium flowers and borage flowers. There's all sorts of flowers that you can eat, but you have to be careful about them. So before you put anything in your mouth that you're not sure about, always ask a grown-up or a teacher if it's edible. So there we do. We have a few of our beautiful chive flowers that we're going to add, which will also add flavor. Okay, so we've broken that up. And I'm going to bring back my lemon zest that I made earlier, which you can see here. Okay, now these are some other chives that I cut earlier, but the plants were older and they're a little too woody, so we're not going to use those ones. Instead, we're going to use the ones that I just showed you how to chop, and I'm going to use my trusty board here. Now I noticed a few little pieces here that didn't really get cut, so I'm just going to have a quick go at those. There we go. And now I'm going to put everything in my little dish. That's why I love these flexible cutting boards, because you can just bend them and everything falls straight into your bowl. So there we go. These are the things I'll be adding. I'm going to be adding salt, maybe some black pepper, and possibly some red chili flakes instead of black pepper. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I should take a vote. Which would you prefer? Some people like spicy things and some people don't. Anyway, in a few minutes we're going to check on our cheese. So here's my little ingenious workaround for letting my cheese drain. As you can see, I have taken my ball of cheese and I have tied it over the faucet in the sink, and now I'm just letting it drain into the sink. So that has allowed me to then finish draining. It's been about 20-25 minutes, and as you can see, it's starting to firm up into a nice ball. It's still flexible, like a piece of soft Play-Doh, or maybe like a mozzarella. And I'm getting ready to mix all of my ingredients into it, and then I'll decide if I want to make a hard, soft, or medium cheese, and we can decide together how we're going to use it. Okay? And I wanted to show you my bowl of whey. Here it is, and if you taste it, I'll give you a description. I'm just going to put my measuring spoon in here, and I'm going to taste it. So it's sort of sour, but not really, and it's sort of sweet like milk. And the thing is that all the nutrition that's in it in the whey is really good for baking. So if the next time you make pancakes or waffles, it calls for any water in your batter, or even some milk, you can use whey instead. It's great for making all sorts of things. So you can put it in a jar and keep it in the refrigerator, and it keeps for quite a long time. Okay, so we're gonna take our ball of curds down and put them in a bowl and mix in some salt and decide what to do next. So as you can see, I've taken my ball of curds down off of the faucet, and I'm going to unwrap my curds and see what it looks like now. So as you can see, it's holding its shape rather nicely. And if I take, let's say, a spoon or the back of a knife or something like that, you can see it's very soft. When you press on it, it kind of bounces back. You see that? And most of the whey has been drained away, but it's still somewhat soft. So I'm just going to let it, put it in the bowl. Now I'm going to scrape the rest of the cheese off. But there we have a beautiful ball of curds. And so I'm going to break it up a little bit. I'm going to taste it right now so that I can tell you what it tastes like. I'm going to take a little taste. I'm not going to put it in my mouth because I want to use the knife. So it's warm and a little chalky. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up so you can see what it looks like inside. It's a little softer inside. It looks like kind of a little bit like cottage cheese. And what we're going to do now is we're going to salt it. Okay? because it does need some salt. So remember, it's called for 3/4 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to take my teaspoon, this is a teaspoon measure, and I'm going to just sprinkle a little salt. Yeah, and I'm just going to kind of mix it in. I'm going to try not to break up the curds too much. There we go. I'm going to take another taste and see how we feel about that. Much better. I think it could use just maybe another 1/4 teaspoon. Again, this is not really rocket science. You have to do it according to your own tastes. And so I've just added a little bit more, and I'm using kosher salt. If you use sea salt, it's much saltier, so you have to use less sea salt. Okay, one more little taste. Perfect. That's delicious. So now we have to decide what we'd like to do with it. You could just put it in the fridge like this in a container. It will continue to drain a little bit, so you might want to check the container tomorrow and just drain off any additional whey. And then you can just use it to crumble on tacos or however you like to use your queso fresco. I like to make kind of a little hors d'oeuvre cheese out of it. So in our next segment, I'm going to show you how to do that. And I think your parents might really enjoy this too. So if they're not watching, you should get them to come and watch with you. So now we come to the exciting part. I'm going to mix some ingredients into our fresh fromage blanc queso fresco and kind of convert it into a bit more of an appetizer kind of cheese that might be fun to eat on crackers or some French bread. Here's my lemon zest that we made before. I'm going to tip that in and just get every little last good little piece of lemon zest. And then I'm going to sprinkle in some of my delicious chives that I chopped. And that looks good. I've done like 3 or 4 pinches, which is probably about a tablespoon. And I also was looking around and I found some fresh but slightly dried thyme from my garden. And so I'm just going to take it off of the branch and squeeze it in here. And when you have a dried herb, it's good to mash it up in your hand a little bit like this. It releases some of the aromatics or the smells. So just take a little bit of that, and if you have it in a jar, you can still do this. Just mish it between your fingers like that. So I've added a little thyme. And now the question is, do I want chili flakes or black pepper? And I think today I'm going to use black pepper, and I don't want it to be too fine, so I'm going to unscrew the grind on here just to make it a little coarse. And I'll just put some in here so you can see that it's kind of on the coarser side. Okay, so I'm going to add that. A few pinches of pepper. I would say I did about not more than 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then I'm just going to get a scraper and mix everything together like this, just loosely. As you can see, it looks like a little bit like cottage cheese or ricotta. And like I said before, you can use this in as a replacement for ricotta. Now, if we were going to make ricotta, we would take our whey and we would add a little bit more milk to it and we would cook it again. Ricotta is an Italian word that means cook again, and so ricotta is actually made from the whey, but we would have had to have used rennet, which is a different way of, it's something that you add to milk to make curds, but we can't really make ricotta with this whey. We don't have enough of it for a start. But anyway, this can be used, the cheese, this queso fresco, the consistency is such that you could definitely use it instead of ricotta in a recipe. So this looks like it's nicely mixed. I'm going to show it to you. There we go. You can see all of our herbs are mixed in there. And I'm going to take a little taste. I think I'll just take this one on my finger, like that. Hi. I have to change the camera angle a little bit so you can see me again. There we go. So that's delicious. It has a little bit of the chive flavor, so it's vaguely onion-ish, a little bit, maybe going a little bit towards garlic, but not really. You could add a little garlic powder to this, that would be really nice, or a little minced garlic. I might add a smidge more pepper, because I think it needs it. Okay, and another little handful of chives. And I think we're gonna let it set, and by tomorrow, all those flavors will be melded together, and it will be absolutely delicious. So I suggest finding a container with a nice top on it, and you can put your queso fresco in there. It will keep easily for a week. So if you're not ready to use it today, you can use it tomorrow or whenever you're ready. So it's been really fun making homemade queso fresco, fromage blanc, or paneer. And you can find all sorts of recipes like this online, and I put the recipe at the end of this video so you can get this recipe from there. So if you make it, please let us know how much you like it, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.